There are a million ways to use layers in digital painting, and here is every one of them. Wait for number 7, 8 and 9, which are personally my favorite ones. The first one is probably the most common way to use layers. Use them for line art, the flat colors, light and shadow. Each layer represents a different stage of the illustration. For example, you could start with a sketch layer, where you scribble a basic sketch. Then you could use a layer above that for a more refined drawing that acts as a base for coloring. Next, you could put the flat base colors on a layer. On top of that, you can then put a layer for the shadows and a layer for the highlights. This is a very common technique, and the benefits are these. It allows you to work in stages and clearly separate each step. Make a sketch first, then refine it into a cleaner drawing. Then put down the basic colors, and finally work on light and shadow in isolation. Another cool thing about this method is that you can easily change the colors of objects as well as the colors of light and shadow. This way you can easily change the whole lighting situation. The second way is a bit simpler but no less useful. Characters, foreground and background. Use layers to separate your characters and your background. Just paint your background on one layer and put your characters on one or several layers on top of that. The benefit is that you can easily manipulate your characters without destroying your background. You could delete and repaint whole parts of your characters while the background stays intact. And you could also move them around in the scene as you see fit. The downside of this method is that your characters can look like they are just pasted on your background. Because they, well, kind of are, right? To fix this, you need to make sure the edges of your characters are not too perfect and that the colors match the lighting situation of the background. The next method takes this concept a bit further. Put each individual object on a layer. This way of using layers doesn't just put big things like the characters in a scene on a layer. Instead, you put smaller parts on layers. For example, you could put the head of a character on a separate layer, or each limb of the character. You could put several clothing elements on a layer. This method allows you to add or subtract as many objects, or parts of objects, as you want. And you can then freely move them around in the scene, or repaint or distort them. The arm doesn't look right? No problem, just delete that layer and repaint it. This way you will already have many more layers than in method number 2. But you can still take this up a notch. Draw individual details on separate layers. Details could literally be anything. From just smaller parts of your characters to things like intricate textures. The cool thing about this method is that it separates the detailing stage from the rest. As soon as the big idea of your painting is put down, the big shapes, the basic colors and light and shadow, then you can focus exclusively on details, without messing up the painting as a whole. Also, it allows you to control the amount of detail in every area of your painting. It's best to concentrate details in the area where you want your viewer to focus. If you overdid it and painted too many details, you can just erase them or dial them back in certain areas. Quick note here, I offer personal coaching sessions for digital painting. Just hit the link below if you're interested. The next method to use layers is something else entirely. Adjustment layers. These are different because you don't actually paint on them. They are used to, well, adjust a painting, especially the colors. You can use levels or curves to adjust the contrast. Or you could use a hue saturation layer to change the whole colors or the color temperature of the painting. This is so useful because you can try out or fix things without repainting the whole image. For example, I sometimes end up with muddy colors after painting for a few hours. With adjustment layers, I can easily fix this without repainting everything, which would take another few hours. The sixth type of layers is effect layers. These layers are used specifically to spice things up at the end. Now, keep in mind that I'm no expert on this because I rarely use them. But I know that you can create some cool lighting effects with these. To achieve those, you can use certain blending modes like overlay, hard light, soft light, addition or color dodge. For example, in this painting of mine, I could use a new layer with the blending mode addition and make certain elements like the diamonds in her crown seem like they are glowing. The next method is one of my personal favorite ways to use layers. Versions. As the name suggests, these are used to save different versions of your painting. The way I do it is that instead of saving my painting as a new file after each painting session, I just start on a new layer every time. I usually do my paintings in several sessions that can range from a few minutes to a few hours. And sometimes I don't like what I painted the day before, like at all. This way I can always go back to the stage before I presumably ruin my whole painting. So basically each version layer represents a specific painting session. You can also use this general strategy for something else. Painting tests. This method is similar to using version layers, but here layers are used more as, well, tests. I happen to do this a lot. Whenever I'm not quite sure how to continue painting, I paint what I think could work, but I do it on a new layer. This is my test layer. Didn't work? No problem, I can just delete it and try something else. I sometimes use these as deliberately temporary layers as well, to just scribble a random idea on top of my painting as a test that I'll delete afterwards. The last one is a bonus. It's different from the rest because you can also start using just one layer. Plot twist: you don't have to use layers. You can paint everything on a flat canvas. No, really, I do this all the time. I feel like layers, despite how useful they can also be the great pain in the ass. You constantly have to be aware of which layer you are painting on. And the more layers you have, the harder it is to actually find the right layer. And God forbid, don't make me talk about painting on the wrong layer. It's so frustrating to use the wrong layer for like 20 minutes and only realize it at the end. I bet you know what I mean. When painting on one layer, you always paint on the right layer. Duh. Also, without having to manage your layers all the time, painting can feel more like traditional painting. It's a nice change of pace and kind of a simpler way to paint. Your characters will also integrate into the scene better. You won't have the problem of two perfect edges if you remember method number 2. Like I said, I paint this way most of the time. But I get how it can maybe feel a bit restrictive. You don't have the flexibility that multiple layers give you. It's not as easy to change things or move things around at the end. That's why nowadays I often use version layers and painting test layers. Now, are these really every way to use layers? Probably not. So if you people have any more creative ideas on how to use layers, let me know in the comment section. Thanks for watching.